one of my big interests really has to do with apologetics and criminal cases and all of that. And there's this one guy I really enjoy listening to. I enjoy reading. He is the author of Cold Case Christianity, Dr. Wallace. He's a Christian, and he's also a crime specialist on murders, and he's an investigator, a detective, something like that, right? So I got this from him, and I also got this from my very first discipler, and I thought I would share it. There are three G's, the three G's for temptation. It's gold, glory, and girls, at least for us guys. Okay, so gold or money, glory or pride or fame, and then girls. But I thought it would be more unisex, and it's now called the three P's. And I would call the three P's as power, pleasure, and profit. Power, pleasure, and profit. So power, that has to do with your authority, your status, your pride, your ego, being known, being significant, being, better than others. That's your power. And then there's pleasure. Pleasure has to do with sex or anything connected to something sensual, something carnal, something pleasurable. It doesn't have to be sex. It usually is, but it can be in the form of, let's say, food, gluttony, or just having a lifestyle that is all about the pleasure. And then you've got profit. Profit has to do with money, so basically greed. And so these three go together. I think the power, pleasure, and profit, I think, is the unholy trinity, or the trinity of sin, or the dark trinity, however you want to call it. And many times what people don't understand, that people need to realize, is that sin goes around these three, and normally power is the most deceptive. Pleasure and profit, a little bit easier, a little bit obvious. Okay, so I'm going to explain that in a bit, and I'm going to explain how people leverage these to get the others. So first, let me talk about why power is more deceptive, because a lot of people will say, I don't really have problems when it comes to the pleasure and profit. Like profit, I just don't have to steal. If I just don't steal, if I just don't amass too much wealth, and I don't really have access to unlimited wealth, then I don't really have an issue with profit. But actually that's not true, because many times people have envy, they covet, they have jealousy in their hearts, and normally it's not just the profit, but what the profit actually can do for them, the kind of things you can buy, the things you can afford, the lifestyle you can have. That's all coming from profit, and the profit points to pleasure. It points to how you live pleasurably, or it can point to power, right? So ego, status, pride, all of that. So these three work together. Now here's the problem. Many times people don't realize that we leverage one or two to get whatever we don't have. So let me give a few examples. I'll give one example for the guys, one example for the girls. But I'm not saying, okay, disclaimer, I'm not saying that all guys do this, and I'm not saying all girls do that. I'm just giving common examples. So for example, guys, I'm sure you've seen guys who are really, really old and yet very, very rich, and they're dating these really, really young women. What is happening here? They're leveraging power and profit to get pleasure. In other words, they use power and money, profit. They have both already. They have power and profit. They use it to attract the girls so that they can get the pleasure. Girls, on the other hand, might leverage two other things to get the third. So for example, girls might use pleasure, sex, or they weaponize sex or use their sexuality, and then they use their power. In other words, they talk about how great they are, how wonderful they are. They pretend to be someone they're not, so that they can attract men who would spend for them. So they're using power and pleasure. They weaponize those two to gain profit, whereas men use power and profit to gain the pleasure. That's a usual scenario on the men and women, but I'm not saying that's always the case. Things can change. But what I'm saying is people usually leverage one or two to get whichever third or second and third that they don't have. All right, and that's a very dangerous thing. And many times the power side is the most dangerous and most subtle. With sex, it can be, or pleasure, it can be from not having self-control and eating ourselves to death, eating all the diabetic food when you've got diabetes, all the cholesterol food when you've got really, really bad cholesterol. It could be pleasure, could be just lying down in your house, not exercising at all, knowing that the doctor has told you several times, you gotta get up and you gotta move and you gotta go to the gym and you gotta start lifting weights and you gotta be healthier. So pleasure has to do with not doing certain things for your health, or doing all the bad things to your health because they're pleasurable. Profit has to do with envy, covetousness. It has to do with doing everything you can to be an extreme workaholic just so you can get more money. So the root there might be fear. It might be doubting God's provision. It might be anxiety because you believe that God doesn't really care about you and doesn't really want to provide for you, things like that, right? And then you've got power. Power is really deceptive because even if you say, oh, I'm not a YouTuber, I'm not a celebrity, I'm not, no one's following me on Instagram or whatever, the truth of the matter is, power doesn't have to be this celebrity status giant thing. It can be as simple as you and your circle of friends, whatever your social circle is. So for example, if you're a Christian, or let's just say you're a Christian and you're a minister in church, power could be which church is the biggest church in the city? How many people are attending my church versus their church? How many people say I'm a great preacher compared to how great those other preachers are? How many people follow me on my Facebook, on my YouTube, and subscribe to my channel? And it's actually funny because I'm uploading this on YouTube without even caring how many people subscribe. But really, that's it. Instagram is all about us. It's all about, who we are. And, it's very tempting and it's very deceptive, right? So Instagram, and then there's Twitter, and then there's, I don't know what else, Reddit, there's Reddit, what else? Some people say it's not really social media, it's called social me marketing, because you are marketing yourself. So it's social me marketing, or social marketing me. And that's really, really true. Even on Facebook, for example, if it's someone's birthday, you can just greet them happy birthday. But many times, what do? We try to quote unquote market our friends and greet them publicly and write all these long things and promote them to people. And it's a promotion of self and a promotion of each other in a bid for the first P, power. Because it feeds our pride, it feeds our ego, it feeds our significance. We want to belong, we want to be someone, we want to be somebody, we want to be up there in the big crowds, in the big table with the big boys, things like that. So I would say just be very, very careful with the 3 Ps. So you've got power, pleasure, and profit. For guys, maybe it's easier to just remember the 3 Gs. Gold, glory, girls. But again, to make it unisex. So power, pleasure, and profit. Now, how are we to be careful about these things? By simply checking your heart. When you pray, when you get to read the Word, when you go through the Bible, just ask God, Lord, how am I when it comes to these 3? Are there areas of my life where I am pursuing power, pleasure, or profit in ways that are ungodly, in ways that no longer bring honor to you, in ways that are actually sinful? How am I leveraging any of these 3 to get the stuff that I don't have, which you don't want me to have yet? Or maybe never at all. So those are things that I think we have to be very, very careful about. Because if we're not, we can be just as easily ensnared as all the scandals of Christendom that we have seen ravage the church for the past few years. I hope this was helpful to you guys. God bless you.